what is constitutional morality? That I should abide by the values, morals, principles of the Constitution. This is not something which happens naturally. This is not something that happens because you read some text, but it is something that is imbibed in individuals over a long period of time through education. How those constitutional morals and values can help you in achieving good governance, and how they can help you in achieving accountability. Some values of Constitution with how it can help you in achieving good governance, how it can help you in achieving accountability.
Congratulations on clearing UPSC 2024. Watching you succeed is really inspiring.
Thanks. I have been in your shoes. I know how overwhelming the start feels.
Exactly. There's so much to cover, I don't even know where to begin.
I felt the same. That's why I joined the GS Foundation course by Vision Eyes, which offers structured classes, expert faculty, and regular revision. It gave me clarity and momentum.
And you stayed consistent with it?
Yes, I followed the complete roadmap offered by the course. If you're aiming for 2026, start with this course. It offers you holistic coverage with every stage of the exam covered seamlessly. This is where your journey will truly begin.
Got it. I will definitely explore the course. Where can I find the details?
Just visit their website or call on the given numbers.
Let's start with ethics in administration or ethics in governance. One second. Now, ethics in governance this year, I would say the questions were a bit tricky, not because of the answer that had to be provided, but because of the language which had been used in the questions. The language was a bit tricky to deal with. It was difficult to understand what the question is asking. But once you interpret the question, then after that, the job becomes very easy. So the challenge was that you need to be able to decipher what the question is asking well, and then writing the answer is not that challenging. So let's look at the questions that have been asked this year. The first one is related to constitutional morality. It seems that constitutional morality has become one of the favorite topics of UPSC. They ended up asking this topic 2 times earlier in the same year in paper 2 and paper 4. And they have done the same this year as well. One question in paper 2 and another question in paper 4. So the question is, constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment but a product of civil education and adherence to the rule of law. See, what is constitutional morality? That I should abide by the values, morals, principles of the Constitution. This is not something which happens naturally. This is not something that happens because you read some text, but It is something that is imbibed in individuals over a long period of time through education. It is a sense of responsibility that has to be imbibed in individuals, that we should adhere to constitution and constitutional values and principles irrespective of the situation and circumstances. So it says, examine the significance of constitutional morality for public servants, not for general people, but for public servants, especially highlighting the role in promoting good governance and ensuring accountability in public administration. So now basically what the examiner is saying is that you have to tell what is the importance of constitutional morality, or basically adhering to constitutional principles, values, morals, spirit, and how that can help you in achieving good governance and accountability in public administration. तो क्वेश्चन बड़ा सिंपल है अगर आप इसको समझ लें, which is nothing but constitutional morality से आप कुछ वैल्यूज डिराइव करेंगे, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल वैल्यूज और मॉरल्स डिराइव करेंगे. How those constitutional morals and values can help you in achieving good governance, and how they can help you in achieving accountability as a civil servant. ये है क्वेश्चन. अब देखिए, if you know what are some of the elements of good governance, for example, rule of law, participatory decision making, equity, efficiency, inclusiveness, and let's say you know about the elements of accountability, that accountability comes with that you should be answerable for your actions, accountability comes with transparency, accountability comes with certain mechanisms to impose penalties on individuals. If those ideas are known to you, you simply need to relate some values of constitution with how it can help you in achieving good governance, how it can help you in achieving accountability. So first in this question, therefore, what you have to do is simply define constitutional morality. Do that. No need to unnecessarily beat around the bush, which is nothing that constitutional morality refers to steadfast adherence to values, norms, philosophy of the constitution. It means not just interpreting the constitution literally, but understanding the spirit and the core philosophy of the constitution. Now, then you will say constitutional morality can be seen in various ideas, और उसको बस short में mention कर दीजिएगा. For example, some of the ideas will be rule of law, some of the ideas will be equity, some of the ideas will be social justice, fraternity, integrity, accountability. ये सब चीजें already constitutional morality का part है. Now what we have to do is, once you have mentioned that, you can give two separate headings. Role of constitutional morality in good governance and role of constitutional morality in achieving accountability. So those are the things which you can basically mention. अब इसमें क्या क्या हम mention कर सकते हैं? For example, good governance का एक बहुत important principle है rule of law, और constitutional morality का भी एक बहुत important principle है rule of law, which means that decision making should not be arbitrary. So civil servants should take decisions as per careful consideration and analysis of various aspects. This will help them in achieving constitutional good governance goal of rule of law through constitutional morality. Okay, so they align with each other. For example, you can mention, अब यहाँ पे ना examples, एक आधा example देना जरूरी है, सब में नहीं, but one or two examples of the civil servants need to be given. For example, when we talk about the decision should not be taken arbitrarily, or basically as a civil servant, you should not take illegal decisions, or you should not be involved in illegal activities, or you should reject illegal decisions or illegal orders that are given to you. For example, one of the examples that we talk about in our classes is that of P.S. Appu, who was the former director at Labasna in Mussoorie, who refused all the political pressure, where he wanted to dismiss a particular probationer from service because of his conduct during the Himalayan trek in 1980s. So instead of obeying the illegal order, what did he do? He went on to resign from the position itself. An example of how constitutional morality helped him in upholding the idea of good governance. So that could be one example. Secondly, you can mention that constitutional morality requires us to be non-partisan. It requires us to be showing adherence to, let's say, Article 14 or the principle of equality or the principle of non-discrimination, non-partisanship. That also is a very important principle of good governance. It can help you in ensuring equity as well as equality, non-partisanship. So you can give the example here of, let's say, TN Session. As the Election Commissioner of India, he did not show any kind of bipartisan behavior or partisan behavior towards any particular political party or any political official during the elections. So that is another way in which you can relate the idea of constitutional morality to the principle of good governance. Similarly, you can also talk about social justice. So constitutional morality requires us to follow the principle of social justice, which can help us in achieving equity. How can the civil servants do this? By implementing the affirmative actions in the best possible manner. By taking measures for the upliftment of, let's say, the disabled, or effective enforcement of the policies related to the disabled people, or effective enforcement of policies related to women empowerment. ऐसा कुछ करके आप example, इसमें कुछ real life example दे सकते हैं. You can give the example of, let's say, Kudumbashree. देखिए, सोचने को बहुत कुछ है लिखने को, है ना? So you can give the example of Kudumbashree. Kudumbashree, that was implemented by various IAS officers in Kerala, is an example of how it has helped in achieving social justice, equity, which is the goal of good governance related to the idea of social justice. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से इसको आपको रिलेट करके लिखना है. Similarly, let's say accountability की बात कर रहे हैं. So one of the principles of accountability is transparency. How is transparency driven by the principle of constitutional morality, freedom of speech and expression, and adhering to constitutional goals, let's say under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution? So you can say that we can achieve this by effective implementation of RTI or mandate or proactive disclosures within the government. As a civil servant, if a civil servant adopts proactive disclosure scheme to publish all the information on the government website, then they are ensuring one of the goals of accountability on the basis of principle of constitutional morality, which is freedom of speech and expression. तो इस तरीके से आपको ये चीजें कुछ relate करके लिखनी है. और for example, accountability is ensured through audits. Constitutional morality means that we should follow the principles of strengthening accountability institutions. For example, CAG. CAG को respect करना और showing utmost respect to an institution such as CAG is a principle of constitutional morality that can help us in achieving accountability, which is again what the demand of the question is. ठीक है, so basically 3-4 ideas उठाइएगा and just explain few of them, maybe 3-4 for good governance, maybe a couple of them for accountability, and that should be enough. There is no need for you to go into detail of all of these things as such. And then later on in your conclusion for this particular question, you can say that, as we can see, constitutional morality can act as an ethical compass. It can act as the pole star for the civil servants to guide them in difficult or different situations to achieve the goals of the constitution. ऐसा कुछ करके आप इसको summarize कर सकते हैं. But do remember, when you are writing this, examiner is specifically looking for certain examples. So examples become really crucial. है ना? So when I gave the example of T.N. Seshan, or you give the example of Ashok Khemka with respect to integrity or non-partisanship, or you give the example of Durga Shakti Nagpal, or you give the example of Armstrong Pame, or you give the example, what जो भी कोई आपको example मिले है ना, of whatever you can think. Vinod Rai, you can talk about again accountability and transparency, right? You may give the example of various schemes that have been taken up, various initiatives that have been taken up by civil servants for social equity and social justice. For this, therefore, it is important that you should have at least 15 to 20 names and initiatives taken by some of the civil servants in the past on your hand, literally on the tip of your hands. आपको वो याद होना चाहिए. What are the sources that you can refer for finding those particular examples? You can, one, refer, as I've been telling earlier, the websites such as Better India. You may get some of these examples in the Padma Awards. You may get some of these examples in the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Administration. You may find some of these examples in Indian Express Governance Awards, which they instituted 2 years back. You may find some of the examples on websites such as Nexus of Good as well. तो ऐसी कुछ websites के ऊपर आपको कुछ examples मिल जाएंगे of civil servants, those who have done exceptional work. Not only will you find those examples, but some of these stories are extremely motivating and inspiring as well. So it will generally help you as well to be able to align your goals of while you are getting into the civil services. Anyway, so now this is the first question. Let's move on. So this is related to ethics in international relations. It says war is a diplomacy by other means. You have to critically analyze the above statement in present context of contemporary geopolitical conflicts. Now see, basically what it is saying is, normally when countries try to deal with each other and resolve disputes with each other, they do it through a dialogue-based approach, diplomacy. But it says that war is also one of the tools of diplomacy, or it is also diplomacy by other means. So you have to critically analyze this statement. What that basically means is that I have to tell to the examiner that not only is war one of the tools of diplomacy, but to say that is wrong. There are other tools of diplomacy also that have emerged or that continue to exist in today's day and age. ये इस particular question का essence है. So now, first what you do is you explain this statement only. That the statement tries to say that when diplomacy fails, or often gaps which are left by diplomacy are filled by war tactics by different nations. This can be seen in the following context, और कुछ उसके examples दिए, फिर उसका counter argument देंगे. But in today's day and age, war is not a natural extension of diplomatic interventions. And then you will give certain examples of that. So firstly, in this question, therefore, you explain the statement. What does that mean? वो कहना क्या चाह रहा है? So you will say that a lot of people perceive war is nothing but an extension of diplomacy, which means that when peace negotiations fail, when dialogue-based approach fails, countries resort to war as a tactic to advance their national interests. ठीक है? Once that is mentioned, then you will mention how war is a tool or extension of diplomacy. So to explain this, how war is a tool or it's an extension of diplomacy, you can give the contemporary examples देने हैं ना. Russia-Ukraine war. Russia is using war, let's say, as a tool to create a diplomatic pressure on Ukraine so as to not join NATO. So that is nothing but an example of how war is a tool of diplomacy. So give the example of Russia-Ukraine and how war is being used as a tool by Russia to resist entry of Ukraine into the NATO. Right? So that is one example that you can give. Similarly, Israel-Palestine conflict or Israel-Iran conflict, sorry. Israel-Iran conflict. Israel used war or strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in order to bring them on table and to ask them to negotiate with them through dialogue-based approach. Iran was earlier not willing to sit on the table with Israel. But now, because of the strikes that have been carried out on the nuclear strikes, they are willing to sit on table and have a conversation with them. Third, you can also mention that, let's say, proxy war that is used by countries is nothing but it is a tool of diplomacy only. When Pakistan is using the tool of cross-border terrorism or proxy war against India, what do they want? They want to internationalize or they want to bring up and keep the Kashmir issue alive. And they want to make it appear to the rest of the world that this is an international conflict and it does not exist only between India and Pakistan per se. So you can give that also as one of the examples. So then you can also mention about the increasing assertiveness or presence of China in Indian Ocean region, and the South China Sea is also a way of trying to assert their global power. So they are trying to get into conflicts with the smaller nations in South China Sea, the littoral states of South China Sea, in order to assert their global power, in order to assert their global supremacy, in order to reposition themselves as a global power. Nothing but an example of how war is an extension of डिप्लोमेसी ओनली ना. तो ये कुछ हम एग्जाम्पल जो हैं कंटेम्प्रेरी रेलेवेंस में दे सकते हैं. बट देन यू विल से दैट टू कॉल वॉर एज an alternative or as a tool for diplomacy is a mistake, or it will be wrong to say that war is an extension of diplomacy. Why? Let's try to understand that. So counter arguments में क्या लिखेंगे? See, firstly, there are international laws and sanctions in place today. So countries cannot freely use war as a tool for getting the other countries to negotiate or for asserting their power on the others. Okay, so that is one example that we can give here. Secondly, you can also mention that today there are other tools also which have emerged through which countries are exerting their diplomatic interventions and not necessarily through war. For example, you can mention about espionage. One can also call cyber attacks as a tool of diplomacy that exists today. It is not necessarily war between two nations. Third, to call war as a tool of diplomacy, or today many nations refrain from using war as a tool of diplomacy. Why? Because there is a threat of what? Threat of nuclear war. Prevents countries from escalating conflicts through war. इसमें आप example India का दीजिए, that how we did not want to escalate the conflict between India and Pakistan at the scale of a war. We never used the word war or any of these things. We said that limited interventions, limited operational strikes carried out across the border in order to achieve our strategic objectives. हमने बस इतना बोला. We did not want to escalate it to the level of the war. Even Kargil conflict, both the states were nuclear states. So therefore, we never declared Kargil as a war. It was always declared as Kargil conflict. So the recently concluded Operation Sindoor is also one of the examples of how we are not necessarily, countries are not willing to use war as a tool for diplomacy because it can be very costly. Costly in terms of leading to escalation between nuclear states. You can also mention that how it is anyway a very costly affair. as a tool of diplomacy. You can also mention that today countries are using other measures as well for diplomacy. Soft power, music, cinema. International aid is also acting as a very important tool of diplomacy today, right? So you can talk about India's Maitri, COVID, kya tha? Vaccine Maitri, है ना? During COVID-19 is nothing but an example of India's diplomacy towards the other nations, but not necessarily through the means of war. और आज जो एक contemporary context में एक और चीज लिख सकते हैं. Yes, very good. Tariff wars. Now this is not necessarily a, कैसे लिखते हैं tariff? हाँ, AAR, double ये गलत है एक्चुअली ना ये. हाँ ठीक है. तारीफ. So see, basically problem what has happened is ये ऑटो उसकी इतनी आदत हो गई है ना ऑटो करेक्ट की कि अब कुछ भी उल्टा सीधा लिखो तो वो सही कर देता है. तो एट टाइम्स व्हेन वी आर राइटिंग ऑन द बोर्ड it feels weird to write the spellings because we tend to make mistakes anyway. So you can talk about the tariff wars as well, or the tariffs which are imposed by countries as a tool of diplomacy to get the other countries to negotiate with them, and not necessarily war as a tool for the same. Is this clear to everyone? ठीक है. तो इसको आप जो again conclusion in this kind of a question can be made as that given the costs, given the threats which are associated with escalation of conflicts through war, it is best that countries should try to settle the disputes and issues between them through negotiations and through other techniques and tactics rather than escalating them to the level of the war. ऐसा कुछ करके हम इसको conclude कर सकते हैं. Now, let's move on. Next question. Again, see, in international ethics, जो ethics in international relation का topic है, इसमें जो mostly questions आते हैं ना, they need of course some theory. You need to prepare the, for example, the views of St. Augustine on the just war theory, etc. And you also need to know what are the three theories in international of ethics in international relations: realism and the principled realism, etc. and all of those things. But uske alawa, most of the questions can be solved on the basis of the general understanding that you have of international relations and bringing in certain ethical principles into that. Okay, so for example, when we are talking about that the war is not the strategy for diplomatic negotiations or for diplomacy, you talk about the human cost associated with war, how it brings misery. You can talk about जो इसमें हम चीजें कह रहे हैं ना, उसमें ethical perspective जरूर छोड़ते जाइएगा इधर उधर, that it can lead to loss of human lives, or it can lead to global Armageddon, and it can lead to complete destruction of the globe, etc. All of those kind of things you need to also bring in when you are writing the answers. Anyway, now let's move on to the next question. Keeping in mind the national security, examine ethical dilemmas related to controversies over environmental clearance of developmental projects and ecologically sensitive border areas in the country. Now see, this has been a very pet question of UPSC, but they used to ask it in a different form, where the question was always about environment versus development. What they have done this year is that they have related environment to national security. But please remember, this question still is about the issues that are created due to developmental projects which harm environment, and national security is one of the aspects that has to be addressed in this question, because it says that keeping in mind national security, examine ethical dilemmas. So you have to tell what are the ethical dilemmas related to controversies over environmental clearance which are provided for developmental projects in ecologically sensitive areas. So let's try to understand what we have to write in this question. So you begin your answer by talking about how development of infrastructure in the border areas ecologically sensitive areas such as in Northeast, in Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, in Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh is very crucial for India's security. इसमें आप इसको ऐसे भी begin कर सकते हैं that given the infrastructure asymmetry with our neighboring nations, especially China, it is imperative for India to develop the infrastructure in the border regions. Or you can also write, in order to facilitate the movement of the security forces and to ensure the free flow of supply of logistics to them, improvement of infrastructure in the border areas is inevitable. And once you have written that, then you say, but it also throws up various ethical dilemmas. So what are those ethical dilemmas? Let's discuss. First, in the ethical dilemmas related to development of infrastructure in the border areas which are ecologically sensitive zones is, of course, the first one has to be how national security may run into conflict with what? Environment. Can you give example of any project in the recent times which has run into this kind of a conflict or controversy? Andaman and Nicobar Islands is one. The Char Dham project is also one, right? So you can give that example. The Char Dham highway project in Uttarakhand has been criticized because of the deforestation and the damage that has been done to the ecology in the region, but it is crucial for establishing our mobility on the Indo-China border. So that is one thing that you can give. Then secondly, you can mention about how this often creates issues with respect to energy security versus environment भी लिख सकते हैं versus, let's say, tribal rights. Both things can come in here. So this is also one issue. So we can talk about various multi-purpose projects such as dams which have been constructed in the ecologically sensitive areas help us in ensuring energy security. Security केवल बाहर दुश्मन से थोड़ी ना है. We also need to ensure energy security. And for doing that, it often comes into conflict with the tribal rights, displacement of people, and it would often come into conflict with the environment as well. Again, can you give any particular example? In Arunachal Pradesh, various multi-purpose projects have been set up. For example, Siang multi-purpose project you can mention. In Himachal Pradesh, various multi-purpose projects have been set up for ensuring our energy security, but that comes at the cost of conflicting with the environment. Then you can also mention about, in order to improve mobile connectivity. So mobile connectivity improve करने के लिए various mobile tower projects come up, which creates what kind of dilemma it creates? It creates again of improved communication for the security forces versus, let's say, the environment. Especially you can talk about various species of birds. Some of the rare species of birds, etc., may get affected as a result of some of these mobile tower projects which are erected in the border areas of the country. This also comes into conflict in a sense that this helps in uplifting the lives of people living in the border areas, which is also a very important part of national security. But at the same time, it comes into conflict with the environment. So you can mention that as well. Then uske alawa, you can also mention about that how this can create challenges of, we may look at certain short-term gains, but it may create the challenges with long-term sustainability. So the Great Nicobar project has helped us in establishing significant presence in, yes, but at the same time, this has also come in conflict with environmental sustainability, है ना. इसके अंदर ग्रेट निकोबार प्रोजेक्ट का एग्जांपल दे दीजिएगा. इसमें सियांग प्रोजेक्ट का एग्जाम्पल दे दीजिए. Char Dham project you can give as an example. All of those things can be mentioned. Then apart from that, you can also mention that at times for national security, we try to provide expedited approval to the various developmental projects. But that comes in conflict with the issue of expediency versus maybe accountability, or expediency versus objectivity, or expediency versus transparency. So transparency also often gets compromised as a result of the same, or accountability also compromised as a result of the same, है ना. तो कई बार ऐसा होता है कि हम फास्ट ट्रैक करने के लिए डेवलपमेंटल प्रोजेक्ट्स इन दी border areas, we provide approval at a rapid pace, and we need the multiple approval to be provided by different departments, but that also often ends up compromising objectivity, it ends up compromising transparency, it ends up compromising accountability as well. So you can mention this, and then once you have done that, you mention in your conclusion that it is therefore important to conduct proper environmental impact assessment, to involve multiple stakeholders including the local communities, civil society organizations, while framing the scheme for developmental projects in border areas of the country, so that we can manage both national security as well as various other concerns of the local communities and environmental issues. ऐसे कुछ करके इसको हम wrap up कर सकते हैं. Now let's move on to the next question. For any kind of social reengineering by successfully implementing welfare schemes. So if you have to address the problems of social injustice in the country, if you have to uplift the marginalized sections of the society, you need to implement the welfare schemes. For effective implementation of welfare schemes, basically ये कह रहा है, a civil servant must use reason and critical thinking in an ethical framework. Justify this statement with suitable examples. अब देखिए कहना क्या चाह रहा है. Any civil servant, while they are implementing the government schemes, while they are implementing welfare programs, of course for social justice, they should do this with a rational, they should do this with a critical thinking mindset, but yet use a ethical framework. Basically, this question is about how a civil servant needs to be objective in their thinking, needs to analyze the various issues, yet at the same time also apply the principles of ethics, such as compassion, such as sensitivity, such as non-partisanship, while they are implementing these government schemes and programs. So that is what it is essentially talking about. So you can simply begin by explaining the statement itself, that it is an important duty of the civil servants to implement welfare schemes for upliftment of marginalized sections of the society. While doing so, it is important for them to remain rational and to be objective in their approach. दो चीजें इसमें मेंशन की जाएंगी. One, you will mention how they can be rational and objective in their approach, and secondly, what is the advantage of being rational and objective in their approach, and third, how they need to also keep into mind certain other considerations. So three things have to be mentioned in our answer. One, we have to mention how they can ensure rationality, or how they can ensure critical thinking. Second part of the answer has to mention about advantages or benefits of this kind of approach. And third is also certain or importance of other ethical concerns as well, while being rational in your approach. So how can you first ensure rationality and critical thinking in your decision making? Examples के साथ चलते चलते justify करना है. One of the ways in which I can ensure rationality or critical thinking is by evidence-based decision making For example, Niti Aayog indices can help us in judging which particular municipality, which state, which local body is doing well or which needs to improve, etc. and all of those things. Second way in which I can incorporate rationality and critical thinking is public feedback. Example, citizen report card initiatives that have been implemented in various municipalities, for example, Bangalore. Third, I can ensure rationality and critical thinking by using data, possibly using artificial intelligence. You can talk about how, let's say, the Met department plays a very important role in providing timely information to the farmers on what kind of crop they need to sow and what are the various other considerations that they need to keep in mind in order to mitigate the losses due to climate change, etc. and all of those things can be mentioned. Then you can also mention that it is important to have, एक और तरीका कैसे कर सकते हैं rationality of critical thinking, having standard operating procedures in place so that you are not working as per your biases, preconceived notions. Rationality कैसे ensure करेंगे? सोच समझ के काम करें. In especially disaster kind of situations, you need to have certain SOPs in place so that you do not get overwhelmed with the problem. So in case of disaster management, having some kind of standard operating procedures can be a big positive. तो ये 4-5 example दे दिए. Basically, see, what you have to remember is try to recollect what you have studied in the basics. You have studied objectivity. वो rationality और critical decision making की बात कर रहा है, critical thinking की बात कर रहा है. इसमें आलतू फालतू में scholar लाकर और ये सब करके कोई इसको complicate करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Simply related to the topic of the syllabus that you have read, which is objectivity. How can civil servants be objective yet at the same time being ethical so that they can implement the government schemes and programs effectively? ये है question. अगर simply अगर मैं इसको बोलूँ तो. Then the second part of the question is you have to tell what are the advantages of adopting such an approach. One, adopting such an approach can help us in reducing errors. If decision making is going to be evidence based, then it is going to reduce errors significantly. Then secondly, it can help us in ensuring accountability as well. Third, if decision making will be rational and will be based on critical thinking, you will have no qualms in exhibiting transparency as well. फिर किस बात का डर? जब मैंने सारे डिसीजन जो है ऑब्जेक्टिवली लिए हैं, रैशनली लिए हैं, तो आई कैन पुट ऑल द क्राइटेरिया ऑन द पब्लिक डोमेन एज वेल. देन if I take decisions critically or through critical thinking, or I take it rationally, especially critical thinking, it also encourages out of the box approach. It encourages out of the box approach. It encourages innovative approach to solving some of the complicated problems. You can also mention that this can help in reducing corruption, because why? You will reduce exercise of discretionary powers. Exercise of discretionary powers will be reduced क्योंकि आप rational decision ले रहे हैं, सोच समझ के decision ले रहे हैं. So therefore you will be able to address the problem of corruption also within the government. Right? So these are some of the things that you can basically misuse of power can be prevented, etc. And all of those things can also be mentioned. Then you give an example, but at the same time, civil servants should not just only act and behave as robots or as machines. They also need to be considerate of the problems of the citizens. एक example दे दीजिएगा. For example, merely following objectivity at times has led to Aadhaar-related starvation deaths in the country. Such problems can be solved by adopting a more compassionate approach. Such problems can be addressed by adopting an approach of equity, trying to address the concerns and the problems of the weakest and the poorest the first. such approach, such ideas can, or such thing can also be, they also, while they need to be rational, why they need to be critical in their thinking, they also need to be showcasing integrity in their behavior, steadfast adherence to highest values and principles. That itself should round up your answer. There is no need to write a separate conclusion. अगर आप इसी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इसको लिख देंगे, then therefore it will help the citizens, the civil servants, not only in achieving efficiency, economy, reducing wastages, but also at the same time ensuring compassionate government, humane governance, right? So something like that can be mentioned. Now, anyway, so this is about कौन सा है ये 4A question. See, it's all about interpretation of the question is what the key was this year. Now let's move on. This, can you tell me which particular portion of the syllabus or which value this is related to? Syllabus पढ़ा है? Syllabus के अंदर important foundational values of civil services mentioned हैं. उनमें से कौन सी foundational value से relate करता है ये? Yes, dedication to public service. So this question is saying that one who is devoted to one's duty attains highest perfection in life. वो आदमी जो अपनी ड्यूटी को डिवोटेड है वो हाईएस्ट परफेक्शन इन लाइफ अचीव करता है. एनालाइज दिस स्टेटमेंट विद रेफरेंस टू सेंस ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी एंड पर्सनल फुलफिलमेंट एज अ सिविल सर्वेंट. See, there are two terms. One is commitment, one is dedication. Commitment is that I will fulfill the contractual obligations that I have as a part of my job. I have to be in the office from 9 to 5. I will do my job properly. That is what commitment is. Dedication is completely immersing yourself to the cause. Dedication to public service will be completely immersing yourself to the cause and dedicating yourself to the cause of public service. Even when it comes at certain inconvenience to you, going beyond the call of duty, a person delivering services, welfare to the citizen beyond what is their job requirement. That is what is called as dedication to public service. So now you begin your answer by simply explaining this only, that civil servants need to, अब इसकी ना basically आपको बताना है कि how it leads to sense of responsibility, dedication से what are the advantages of, or what, why dedication to public service or this sense of responsibility is very important, and how it leads to fulfillment of an individual, self actualization वगैरह से इसको relate कर दीजिएगा. And then you have to talk about how this can be achieved. So now in this question, therefore, you first begin by talking about that civil servants need to be motivated internally and not by some external stimulus, not some external factors. They should be willing to do the work for the people. They should be willing to go beyond the call of duty and completely immersing themselves in welfare of people, not just for contractual obligations. So you will mention civil servants need to be motivated internally, not external factors. इसमें plus you will basically add, इसमें एक चीज और ऐड कर देंगे, that civil servants need to go beyond the call of duty they do not need to perceive it only as a commitment. That is, they need to look beyond contractual agreements or contractual obligations. They need to perceive public service as something which they have dedicated to themselves completely. In the spirit of in the service of the people lies the service of the nation. Right? So something like that you can mention. Or what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru would say, that public service begins with public spirit. First you need to be public spirited and then public service happens. I need to put myself through all the difficulties. I need to be willing to look beyond everything and work for the welfare of the people. Now, let's talk about why is this important. So talk about importance of devotion to duty. Why should civil servants be devoted to duty and should to the cause of duty and not necessarily that इससे मुझे कुछ मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा? One, you can of course give the idea of Nishkam Karma, the principle of Bhagavad Gita, which is saying that, or deontological perspective, that the person should perform their duty not for some fruits or not for the outcomes, but because it is their duty to do so. So that is one. Secondly, you can also mention that civil servants need to be dedicated to duty because lives of millions of people are dependent on the work performed by civil servants. You can mention that there is a significant amount of public trust. उस public trust को maintain करके रखना बहुत important है. Once that public trust goes away, then people will lose faith in democracy. People will lose faith in governance. We cannot afford that. So you need to mention that as well. Then, so maintaining faith and credibility, maintaining the public trust is why devotion to duty is so important and it is so crucial. Similarly, lives of millions of people are dependent on the decisions and the work that you take. Many destitute people are not having any way of surviving in India until unless state comes to their rescue. So you can give the example of, let's say, Gandhiji's talisman. That where he says that whenever you are in any kind of dilemma, recall the face of the poorest person that you have seen and then see and then think that whether the decision that you are going to take, whether the action that you are going to take is actually going to help that poorest person or the poorest man or not. Then another thing is civil servants often work in extremely difficult situations. To overcome these difficult situations, merely commitment is not enough. What is required is devotion. What is required is dedication, where you are willing to fight against adverse circumstances. You can also mention that civil servants often work under constraint of resources. How can you ensure that you are truly able to deliver welfare to the people when you are dedicated to public service? अब इसमें कुछ examples देते जाइएगा, right? Keep giving certain examples as you are mentioning about them. For example, I'll tell you, when I said about in difficult situations to overcome them, you require devotion to duty. You can give example of, let's say, I mean, this is one classic example that I always talk about in our ethics classes of P. Krishna Teja, and a young IAS officer who was himself involved in relief work when the floods occurred in Alleppey in Kerala in 2018. So when the floods occurred, he did not wait for someone else to take an action. He himself stepped out on the ground and started to provide rescue and relief to the people and the individuals, those who were affected by flooding. Or when we are talking about working under constraints, you can give the example of Armstrong Pame. Despite having not enough resources available from the government side to build the road between in the rural areas of Manipur, he went ahead and collected money from various other sources, including crowdfunding, to build this road. तो ऐसे कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स, कोई भी एक दो एग्जाम्पल जो हैं आप यहां पे दे सकते हैं of why devotion to public duty, dedication to public duty is of utmost requirement. And here try to give example of civil servants, but if you can't think, then maybe give example of a political personality. You could give example of someone like a Gandhi, that how he was dedicated to the cause of public duty or the public cause or welfare, and despite the fact that he was frail and old, he went ahead and was trying to address the communal tensions that existed between the various communities at the time of partition. तो ऐसा भी कुछ आप example दे सकते हैं. Or he worked for the upliftment of the scheduled castes in the country, despite the fact that he had other commitments also to fulfill. So any of these examples can be given, but ideally if you give the example of the civil servant, that would be enough, है ना? So इसमें you can for example give the example of E. Sridharan, right, who was again dedicated to the cause of creating world-class infrastructure in the city of Delhi in form of Delhi Metro, and where he was willing to work beyond his hours of duty. Or Varghese Kurian, who was again responsible for Operation Flood and for bringing success to the various farmers in the rural parts of Gujarat by allowing them additional income. So again, those kind of examples can be given. Then iske andar, the second part of the question, you have to basically say that how this can be inculcated. Ab isi ko na, when you are mentioning about this, is also related to that this is important because वो जो responsibility वाला part तो हो गया, but we have to also talk about, so this all fulfills responsibility aspect, okay, but then you have to also talk about that it leads to self, क्या था उसके अंदर, हाँ, yes, right, personal satisfaction. So it leads to self actualization as well. Just talk about that as per the Maslow's hierarchy needs, and a person is able to achieve self actualization only when they are able to immerse themselves in the true cause of their life. And for a civil servant, that has to be for improving the lives of the other people or something like that. Anyway, now last iske andar, then you can mention about some of the measures. इसी के through आप इसको end कर दीजिएगा. How the devotion to duty can be inculcated within the civil servants. It can be inculcated through code of ethics. It can be inculcated through regular sensitivity training towards the problems of the people. It can be inculcated through inspiration, the stories of the inspirational officers in the past, those who have done exemplary work. It can be inculcated through role models. You can have senior civil servants as your role models who can guide you in difficult situations and therefore can help you in continuing in a perseverant manner. Then, next question. To achieve holistic development, a civil servant acts as an enabler and an active facilitator of growth rather than a regulator. What specific measures will you suggest to achieve this goal? Now see, try to understand what this question is saying. It is saying that civil servants need not only be regulators. Regulator mean they should not only be an umpire. They should not only try to keep a check on the activities of the private player. They should not only try to keep a check on the activities of the panchayat or panchayat leaders, etc. But rather, they need to act as enablers. They need to act as facilitators. They need to be involved in capacity building. They need to be involved in training. They need to be involved in providing a platform where people, civil society organization, private organizations can come together and can work with each other. So those kind of things have to be mentioned here. So you again explain the statement itself, that in the traditional role of civil services was that to act as a regulator, to prevent malpractices in the economy, was to keep a check on whether things are being done according to the law or not. But in the modern day, civil servants have to act as facilitator and enablers as well. The question is that what specific measures will you take in order to achieve this goal? But you also talk about importance of this. Importance के साथ साथ measures की बात कीजिएगा. So let's quickly talk about what are the measures that we can suggest in order to ensure that the civil services can play role of a facilitator and an enabler. Firstly, simplify government processes. Government processes को simplify कीजिएगा. So, for example, MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, has made the process of registration of companies easier today. So that is also one of the examples of how you are acting as a facilitator or an enabler in the economy. Similarly, you mention about the Passport Seva Kendra, or basically single window clearance, implementation of e-governance initiatives properly. Passport Seva Kendra could be one of the examples that can be given as that. So now here you can single window clearance mention kar sakte hain, साथ ही साथ you can also mention adopting citizen centric attitudes. Government forms, websites should not be made from the perspective of the civil servant, but should be made from the perspective of the user. So again, make them simple, make them accessible, right? So all those kind of things can also be mentioned.
In UPSC CSE, current affairs isn't just important, it's the heartbeat of your preparation. But with news pouring in from every direction, multiple sources, and endless formats, it's easy to feel lost. The real challenge? Knowing what to study and what to skip. That's exactly why Vision IS brings you the monthly Current Affairs Revision Program 2026, starting 23rd August, 2 p.m. Across 60 comprehensive classes, available both offline and online, we decode the most relevant national and international news for you, drawing from trusted sources like The Hindu, Indian Express, Economic Times, PIB, Yojana, and more. With expert guidance, personalized mentoring, and rigorous MCQ plus mains-oriented assessments, you'll build a rock-solid grasp over current affairs, streamlining your preparation for prelims, mains, and the interview stage. A strong hold over current affairs isn't optional, it's your way to succeed in UPSC CSE.
इसमें एक और चीज इंट्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं. यू कैन सिटीजन सेंट्रिक प्रोग्राम, सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस की बात कर रहे हैं. यू कैन मेंशन अबाउट adopting सेवोत्तम model approach, so that it is easier for the citizens to avail of the services which are provided by the government. Then they can act as a facilitator and an enabler by focusing on capacity building. By focusing on capacity building of the various players. For example, capacity building of Panchayati Raj leaders. So, इसमें एक एग्जाम्पल दे सकते हैं. People's Plan campaign in Kerala, by training people and then making people themselves enabled to make their plan for development. So this is another example that can be given. You can act as an enabler and a facilitator by sharing information with the citizens. So proactive disclosure, implementation of RTI in an effective manner can also be one of the measures that we can suggest to ensure this particular goal of the civil servants. So those kind of things can also be mentioned. Then plus on top of that, they can establish platforms to allow interaction. Establish platform to allow interaction between private parties and civil society organizations. One of the initiatives that you may know about is Darpan Portal, which has been set up by the government for registration of the NGOs, and that can help in facilitating the relationship with the donor organizations, private companies that may be involved in CSR activities, etc. तो ये सब भी कुछ example जो हैं आप दे सकते हैं of how they can act as enablers, how they can simplify the processes, reduce the forms, reduce the effort that the citizen has to go through in order to avail of services from the government, single window clearance, simplification of procedures, processes, e-governance initiatives, establishing certain platforms, capacity building of the citizens. So this is a very classic governance question. Okay. In more than ethics in governance is a very classic governance question. So once you have mentioned about some of these measures that can be taken in order to ensure the facilitator, enabler role of the civil servants, then इसमें और भी बहुत सारी चीजें हैं ना, that they can encourage, instead of top-down approach, bottom-up approach of planning, bottom-up approach of development, and all of those things. Once you have mentioned that, by Adopting such measures, India would be able to achieve the goal of becoming the third largest economy or a developed or Viksit Bharat, ऐसे कुछ करके you can throw around a few of these jargons and end your answer. So it will be easier for इस तरीके की चीजें जो है you can mention that this can help us in achieving the goal of Atmanirbhar and Viksit Bharat by the year 2047 by encouraging the growth of private sector and by giving more power to the citizens to take their destiny into their own hands rather than being dependent on the government for their survival. Now, let's move on to the next question, which is it is said that for an ethical work culture, there must be a code of ethics in place in every organization to ensure value-based and compliance-based work culture. What suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? So this was a question that we were expecting this year somehow. And इसमें क्या कहना है देखिए basically one, you define what is work culture. Work culture is nothing but the collective set of attitudes and beliefs and values of any organization that shape the behavior of and the attitudes of the members of an organization. It says that for an ethical work culture, code of ethics must be in place in every organization. To ensure a value-based and compliance-based work culture, what suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? So basically, what you simply do in this question is that you provide definition of work culture. Secondly, once you provided the definition of work culture, you give the importance or explain what is code of ethics. Code of ethics explain कर दीजिएगा. And then you talk about that how or measures to ensure ethical work culture. उसी में ही code of ethics भी include हो जाएगा. Measures to ensure ethical work culture at any place. Again, give examples. First and foremost, to put a ethical work culture in any workplace, you need a clear code of ethics, which is nothing but goals and values need to be communicated clearly to the members of the organization. Communication of goals and values, ethical goals and values of the members of the organization is very important. So that is one thing that you can mention. So again, you can mention that various organizations which are involved in laying down their code of ethics, private organizations it could be, or government organizations which are involved in this exercise could be the examples in that. Then secondly, you can mention about leadership by example. Lead by example. Give example of, let's say, the Tata group of companies, where someone like Ratan Tata, who was at the helm of the things, used to set an example for the others in the organization to set an ethical work culture. Right? So that could be given as one of the examples. You can give the example of N.R. Narayan Murthy as the head of the Infosys, was responsible for setting a value-based work culture in Infosys by setting example for the senior leadership of the organization. Then third will be regular ethics training. Regular ethics training to be provided to the members of the organization. इसमें आप example दे सकते हैं जैसे कि कर्मयोगी platform etc. and all of those things, or organizations such as Microsoft and Google often conduct these inclusivity and diversity programs where they try to integrate ethics of inclusivity of recruiting people from different sexual orientations or recruiting people with different kind of disabilities as a part of the organization to foster a more inclusive workspace. So again, an example of how you can inculcate ethics at workplace. Then you can also mention integration of ethical principles in evaluation or performance assessment. So you should not assess the performance of a person only on the basis of number of hours that they have clocked or on the basis of the profits that they have brought in, or on the basis of the schemes that they have implemented, but also on the basis of the ethical perspective that they have shown in their work, right? So that is also something. Then apart from that, you can mention adopting transparency and accountability measures. So organizations such as NTPC and ONGC are involved in publishing their annual sustainability and CSR reports. So that also helps in establishing an ethical work culture of accountability, transparency, etc. ये सब चीजें कुछ हम इसके अंदर लिख सकते हैं. Anyway, now let's move on to the last question. बड़ा सारा लंबा चारा बात इन्होंने लिखा है इसके अंदर क्वेश्चन में. मैंने क्वेश्चन देखा तो मेरे को लगा केस स्टडी का क्वेश्चन दे दिया क्या इन्होंने. बट एक्चुअली क्वेश्चन इज सिंपल. There are two problems associated with utilization of funds. Three in fact. Underutilization, misutilization, misappropriation. Basically, which is that funds which are allocated to the government schemes and programs are often not used. They remain underused. And second is misutilization, that they are used for purpose which should not have been the priority of the government, or they are misappropriated by someone. Corruption, leakage is there. या गलत प्रायोरिटीज पे स्पेंड किया जाता है पैसा. So it says that what specific measures would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard to stop leakages and gaining the status of third largest economy of the world in near future? See, basically, you start with the essence of the question only. That in order to achieve economic progress as a nation, it is important for us to put to use limited resources that we have to the best effect. यही तो चाहिए. India is a country with limited resources. We need to use these resources absolutely efficiently in order to achieve economic progress. तो ये premise से आप basically start कीजिएगा. In this regard, two major problems which are faced with respect to utilization of funds in India are underutilization and misutilization. Okay, you explain this underutilization and misutilization to a certain extent. तो इसको कुछ examples के through आप explain कर दीजिएगा. So now basically first in your answer you talk about importance of efficient utilization of funds. Because we are already a country which is having lesser funds, it's important for us to use those effectively. Then you say that two major problems are, one, underutilization and misutilization. इसके कुछ examples दे दीजिएगा of underutilization or misutilization. For example, when we talk about underutilization, one example is MP LADS. A significant amount of money that is allocated under MP LADS is not utilized every year, and it is then carry forwarded to the next years. Now, when this kind of underutilization happens, what are the effects? इससे problem क्या create होती है? Mention that. See, when this underutilization happens, so effects mention कीजिएगा, and what are the reasons mention कीजिएगा, and then of course the question is asking you to measures as well. तो वो आप अलग से mention कर दीजिएगा, measures which are required to address these problems. First, इसको brief में mention करना है बस problem को, है ना? What are the effects of underutilization? It leads to loss of opportunity. Yes or no? है ना? It leads to loss of opportunity. If funds are underutilized, it was an opportunity to do something, but we could not as a result of underutilization of funds, and it leads to lack of capability as well. The capability that you could have achieved with the utilization of the funds, you would not be able to do so if those funds remain underutilized. Why is it that these funds remain underutilized? Lack of political will. It could be due to bureaucratic hurdles. It could be due to lack of training among the officers, officials, etc. Then you talk about misutilization. Misutilization, you give the example of, let's say, the recent Dwarka Way Express project, Dwarka Expressway project. इसके ऊपर report आया CAG का that we ended up significantly spending over overspending on this particular project as compared to what the allocated money was, right? Almost 14 times पैसा खर्च किया हमने द्वारका एक्सप्रेसवे प्रोजेक्ट के ऊपर as compared to what the sanctioned amount was. So now again you mention एक example के through, then you again mention what are the effects. The effects are that it leads to excessive spending, है ना? It leads to corruption, right? It is the intended beneficiaries are not able to get the benefits. So as a result of that, this is loss of entitlement, loss of rights for the citizens, etc. What are the reasons? This is lack of accountability, lack of integrity, lack of transparency, all of those kind of things, lack of proper planning, etc. जब ये mention कर दिया तो now let's quickly talk about what are the measures. ये brief में ही mention करना है. Don't get into details of all of this. One, social audit. Second, public financial management system. Electronic governance basically in the area of fund utilization so that everyone has clarity on कितना पैसा खर्च हो गया, किस स्टेज के ऊपर कौन सी स्कीम है, एक्सेट्रा. इसके अंदर एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं ऑफ खजाने पोर्टल ऑफ कर्नाटका गवर्नमेंट. ओके, सो यू कैन गिव दीज काइंड ऑफ एग्जांपल. सोशल ऑडिट में एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन ऑफ सोशल ऑडिट एज अ पार्ट ऑफ एमजी नरेगा, राइट. देन थर्ड, मेंशन अबाउट outcome budgeting, adopting an outcome budgeting approach rather than an incremental budgeting approach, line budgeting approach. So that can also be given as one of the examples, right? You can also mention strengthening the office of the CAG. CAG के audit को strengthen कीजिए, strengthen the office of the CAG. That could be also one of the ways in which we can achieve the issues associated with underutilization, etc. Then इसके अंदर capacity building at local level. One of the reasons why funds are not utilized effectively is because the local level functionaries are not having enough capacity. So capacity building at local levels. Underutilization इसलिए भी होता है because we have top down approach of giving funds. Rather we should have demand driven approach of allocation of funds to the government schemes and programs. ठीक है? So again, MG Narega is one such example of the same that we can essentially talk about. You can also talk about penalties. Severe penalties to be imposed under Prevention of Corruption Act and the vigilance through CVC and internal audits to be conducted on the government departments, etc. Timely appointment of personnel can also be mentioned. फिर इसके अंदर again you can end that by implementing some of these measures. In next few years, India can aim to achieve the status of the third largest economy along with addressing the economic inequalities. See, third largest economy बनना कोई बहुत बड़ी बात नहीं है. Until unless we are able to raise the per capita GDP in the country, this third or fourth or fifth largest economy is of no use to us. We need to pull millions out of poverty in this country, and only then we will be truly able to achieve the objectives of a developed country, right? Or the goal of a developed country. So these are some of the things that you have to mention in this particular question. हाँ, ये है ना पब्लिक फाइनेंशियल मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम, ई गवर्नेंस इनिशिएटिव ही तो है ये. यही तो बोल रहा हूँ कि एक डैशबोर्ड होगा, उस पे सारे फंक्शनरीज को पता होगा कि अभी कौन सी स्कीम का कितना स्टेटस है, कितना पैसा खर्च हो गया है, कितना पैसा नेक्स्ट इंस्टॉलमेंट में आएगा. All of this is there on these kind of public financial management systems. ठीक है, portals के ऊपर. Yes, any questions that you have? Whatever we have discussed here. Okay, so wishing all of you all the very best. I hope that you were able to gain something from these sessions. Thank you.